Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Serious topic, a little on the dark side, let's do it. People who have accidentally killed someone. What happened? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. When I was around 4, I was molested by my cousin who was babysitting me. I told on her, and she committed suicide. I was dating this girl that was a little dysfunctional due to her being SA'd by her grandpa and nobody knew about it. I noticed some red flags and got her to open up and tell me about it. After we broke up, I told her mom she should stop inviting grandpa over to Thanksgiving dinner due to the SA. The mom called me a liar, but after asking the other daughters or cousins about it, they confirmed it was true and that they had all been molested too. After word got back to Grandma, she said, "I'll take care of it." Fast forward a week and Grandpa's dead. Apparently, Grandpa had a lot of serious medications he was taking, and Grandma messed with the dosage, which killed him. His death was ruled natural cause, and nothing ever happened to Grandma. It was my mother-in-law's birthday, and her daughter and son-in-law had dinner for the event at their place. My wife, 3 kids, and I drove out after work. As we pulled up to their cul-de-sac home in the dark, I saw something odd in the grass between the sidewalk and the street near the mailbox. When I got out, an old man, 80 plus years old, called over to me asking if I wouldn't mind helping him up. Said he had been out for a walk, stumbled, and had been in that spot for about 45 minutes. My wife and daughters went inside the house. My then 12-year-old son stayed with me while I helped the man up. Wonderful guy. Started saying this was the icing on the cake for his day, as he had fallen asleep early afternoon on his couch with a lit cigarette, which caught the couch on fire. Fire department came, put the fire out with little damage, and moved the couch to the curb when they were done. By this time, my brother-in-law had come outside with us. We walked the man back to his house about 5 doors down. During our trip there, he regaled us with stories of him in the Navy during the war, and I'm ashamed to say, I can't remember which war he had said. He made special not to talk to my son about how wonderful it was that he was helping. Introduced himself to us as Bill. Said he was the last unpaid bill. Thought that was pretty clever. As we made to leave, he asked if we would bring his couch from the curb back up to the house for him. Not sure why he wanted it, didn't ask. So my brother-in-law and I moved the couch and set it next to the house outside of his garage. We wished Bill well, then headed back to the house for dinner. When I got in, I noticed that my shirt smelled of burnt plastic. Brother-in-law gave me a sweatshirt to change into, and we had a great birthday celebration before I and the family left about 2 hours later for home. Around 2:30 the next morning, our phone rang. My wife answered, and I pretended to be more asleep than I actually was, so I didn't have to deal with a bad phone call in the wee early hours. They're very seldom about good things. It was the police department from the town my brother and sister-in-law lived in. They asked me questions about my activities the previous evening while I was at their house. The effing couch reignited and burned Bill's house down, killing him in the process. The police grilled my brother-in-law, examined his arms, and then called me. I don't think I slept well for over a month afterwards, and couldn't get the tragedy out of my head for a long time. I should have known from the smell on my clothes that it wasn't safe to move that damnable couch. I should have put the pieces together, but I was just too interested in getting back to my family to celebrate. Nothing more ever came of it, but I'll never get rid of the knowledge that if I hadn't committed to one simple action that I had performed, that another human being would not have died. I was relieved when my sister and brother-in-law moved a couple of years later, because I hated seeing that empty lot every time I went to their house. This was maybe 11 years ago, but to this day, about once a year around my mother-in-law's birthday, my brother-in-law and I still have a toast to the last unpaid bill. War survivor from Chechnya, 94 to 96. I told a girl maybe 17 years old to run out from the apartment building because I was so sure it was going to collapse. It didn't collapse, and she ran out into a hail of gunfire and died. I was so scared that I stayed in the building, and it just never collapsed the entire time, so I left out the back. I often think about that. It was such a quick decision. She was right near the door. I was on my way out because the building felt like it was shaking, and I saw her and I said, "Run out, the roof is gonna fall." And she ran out in a hurry and got blown apart by gunfire, shrieking in pain until she was hit again and presumably died. I wish I didn't tell her that, obviously. It still sort of haunts me to this day, especially her screaming. But I also know that I made the decision in goodwill trying to save her life. And to be fair, the building really felt like it was going to collapse, and everyone was running out, not just me. Anybody would have told her to run as well. Nobody knew they were opening fire on the building. I know it sounds like lame justifications, but it is all I can think of to help ease my mind. Anybody would have done the same. I hope, at least. Turned left into my sister's driveway at 3 a.m. A guy on a Harley was doing 60 in a 30-mile-per-hour zone with no headlight. My half-ton pickup left 4 feet of skid marks from being pushed back by the force. I still remember seeing him do mid-air somersaults. This was 1976. I was supposed to meet a friend to head to soccer practice, but he wasn't there when I got to where we were supposed to meet. I got impatient and decided to head to practice myself. He never got there, so I assumed he was sick or something. 2 days later, my mom told me he got hit by a car and died after running out into the street to get a ball he was kicking while waiting for me. The timing of things seems like if I had just waited just a minute longer, he wouldn't have had to wait for me and would have lived. I was driving from a friend's house last November on a road I've driven a million times. I knew one area was particularly dark at night because the city hadn't replaced the streetlights in over a decade. The dark area also crests a hill in a residential area between 2 crosswalks that are far apart, so people cross the road at the top of this hill. Knowing all this, I still never saw him coming. There was a huge thud, and my window was cracked all the way across. I turned around and saw him laying motionless on the sidewalk. It was late, and no one else was there, so it was just me, parked on a side street, and this body. I checked his pulse when I was on the phone with 911, but couldn't feel anything because I was shaking so badly. This was maybe a quarter of a mile from the hospital, so the paramedics were there before I even realized what had happened. They put him up on the stretcher with this strange device that I found out later was to automatically compress his chest. The cops showed up, and I finally saw my car with a flashlight. There was a large chunk of flesh and blood caught on the side of my car. I passed my sobriety test, and they took me home. He lived for 3 days before dying due to complications of the accident, and was never conscious during that time. I found out through a friend of mine, who's the editor at a local paper, that the police were still considering charges, also how I found out that he had died. I was obviously a mess about the accident, but also the possibility of involuntary manslaughter. After the officer called me to tell me officially that he had died, I consulted a lawyer and was basically told not to talk to the police again and to let them conduct their investigation. 2 grueling weeks later, I got a phone call at midnight from the officer who gave me my sobriety test. He worked 3rd shift. He told me that the guy was incredibly intoxicated and basically stepped into oncoming traffic without paying attention. With that info, I wasn't to be charged, and I could go pick my car back up. The relief I felt was indescribable, but also terrible that I could feel so great in a situation where someone died. What made that feeling worse was that the officer told me the family of the guy were super concerned with how I was doing, and that they wanted to tell me they didn't blame me. He was 24 and had just graduated college. It was his last night in town before going to his hometown. I go to his Facebook page every once in a while just so I don't forget what he looked like. I'm at least partially responsible for 3 deaths, so I'm a weather forecaster. A few years ago I was forecasting for Afghanistan. Now, we were doing these forecasts from a base in the States, which means we had to coordinate our forecast with someone who was deployed to Afghanistan. Sometimes the downrange forecaster was really experienced. Other times, they weren't. It was a mixed bag. Anyway, I'd been forecasting for this region for at least 2 years at the time of this incident. I was familiar with it, and I was actually in a supervisory capacity, simply overseeing all of the forecasts going out in my zone. Well, one day I was talking with one of my forecasters about the potential for large hail and how I'd like him to put that in his forecast. And that's a big thing to put in a forecast because of how operationally significant it is. Aircraft must be put in hangars, missions are canceled, assets must be protected, etc. So, when it came time to discuss this with the downrange forecaster, he was absolutely against it. He didn't want to brief that to the commander because, again, missions have to be canceled based on what you will think will happen. If you're wrong, you've set back a lot of people and wasted a lot of time. So the deployed forecaster tries to argue against it, but his reasoning really just boiled down to, I don't want to brief that. So, when I wasn't looking, he essentially just pulled rank on my junior forecaster and forced him to take it out of the forecast. And so, it went out of the base with no hail in it, only hinting at some vicinity thunderstorms. Well, when I noticed, I was pissed, but I said, screw it. We'll let them be wrong. This was the first time I'd ever wanted to put a large hail in the forecast. Maybe we were over forecasting it? Nope. Basically right on schedule. A huge thunderstorm popped up and dumped large hail in the base. It did a few million in damage to aircraft, injured helo pilots who were pre-lighting for his bird, and killed 3 Afghan National Army soldiers who had been left on a patrol and couldn't find any cover. They wound up beaten to death by hail. That has always bugged me. They didn't even need to die. We knew the potential was there, and I basically just let an innocent forecast go out that got him killed. I mean, all these in most ways are pretty sad. A couple are funny. This one, again, not your fault. Weather's gonna do what weather's gonna do, so it sucks, and I know it's easier said than done, but you'll be okay. I used to work a strange overnight schedule, 10-hour shifts, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday. I'd try and keep awake at the same hours on my days off, especially on Thursdays. This was a pretty rural area, so there wasn't much open at this hour, except a gas station that had a tiny cafe area. I didn't want to keep people in the house awake, so I spent a lot of time at the gas station. I'd usually read or talk with the cashier on duty. I think she felt a little stronger or safer having someone else there too. One night, a man comes in with a little boy and asks if they can use the bathroom. It's something like 3 a.m. The kid looks sick or uncomfortable. To me, it looked like he'd been punched in the stomach. After they're in the bathroom, the cashier and I look at each other, and then she thinks there's something off about this too. I went inside, get a look at this to get a description of the vehicle. After they leave, we call the police. The local police passed it along to the county sheriff's department, and a local officer came to the gas station. He asked a couple more questions, and we listened to his radio to hear what was happening. A county officer spots the truck and pulls it over. After the officer gets out of the car, the truck backs into it and takes off. The police pursue him. We didn't get a lot of details after that. He crashed or abandoned the truck. The truck was on fire, and loose rounds of ammunition were going off in the truck. I believe that boy was somewhere safe because I didn't hear any more about him. The guy tried to swim across a small but deceptively treacherous river, and he drowned. That was close to 20 years ago. If I remember correctly, he was the boy's dad, but did not have custody. He was recently released from prison, and the truck was stolen. My wife and I were both very sick with the flu. My father watched our two small children and even came to sit with me in the hospital. The day after I got out of the hospital, he got the flu and died a couple of days later. I still feel guilty knowing that he didn't have to sit with my children, or that he didn't have to sit by my bedside, but he did. It helps knowing that fingers, and it helps knowing that he loved me so much that he was willing to put his life at risk to be with me. I just never imagined that the flu could have been so serious to be hospitalized, much less kill someone. I hold myself responsible, and I feel guilty for getting him sick.